OPTMZ.
Rohani Coombes is a creative director experienced in working with the most compelling brands and talent across the globe. From the gutters of digital feeds to the physical experiences of culture today, her work creatively and aesthetically obsesses psychosocial realities and the interference or elevation that brands can have in our lives.
Thank you so much for joining me here today. My name is Rohani. As you heard, I'm creative director at Morning. So Morning is a creative strategy studio that is based out of London, and we work with clients such as Alexander McQueen, Margiela, Nike, Versace, and many, many more. At Morning, we're built on a philosophy where we believe it can be a new day for the industry, where the web is a powerful tool for good, and we have a responsibility as storytellers to right the wrongs and push culture forward. In essence, our mission is to leave the world a little less shit than it was yesterday, and knowing what it's like to be an agency and like having to work with big corporations, it's kind of acknowledging that to kind of function and exist within capitalism rather than just trying to discard it all, saying like, if we have to work within this infrastructure, how can we at least try to make things even marginally better than they were before? So today I'm going to be talking you through a condensed version of our latest trend report, Data is God. This report was created by the Morning team in response to the descending landscape of doom that AI has imprinted on society in the last year or two. I'm really happy to be here sharing it with you all today. And when Daniel and Jen reached out to me and were talking about what the kind of brief for this was, I felt that this was a really pertinent thing to be showing you all. So what really sparked our interest in the lead up to creating this piece of work was an exploration of the evolving relationships between AI, technology, and humanity. We are in a really interesting time right now where we're kind of surrendering to AI as like the reigning god of the information age. And I think the time in which we're currently living is an era that's going to be studied very significantly by future generations. So once seen as our adversary, for many, AI has rapidly transformed into our most intimate advisor. It operates as part junior colleague, part best friend, part demigod. We used to pray, but now we offer our souls to ChatGPT. So welcome to a new information age, a technological era that is more akin to magic. What's really interesting about this kind of moment of AI is that there's a lot of almost like medieval and mystical elements that apply today that also applied hundreds of years ago. And what we mean by that is there's even a new piece, a screen share that we have from a creative researcher working at Morning that actually came out today. But they talk a lot about the fact that we're seeing almost like seances and mysticism through AI. We're seeing people being brought back from the dead through generative modeling. We're seeing prayers being answered and futures being predicted, and like this intersection of like soul searching with technology that's coming up. And so that was like a really key part of why we created this report. In essence, data has become our new deity. So we spoke to a diverse group of global experts from different backgrounds, locations, each with varying views on technology, from Zeba, who's founder of Her Visions, which is a femme-led creative technology studio, CSM lecturer Kate, who I think is also going to be speaking later today, so you get to hear from her, Al Elwan, who's founder of experimental media platform Post, one of my favorite Instagrams. If you're not following it, you should be. Anna Gowson, who is an incredible AI researcher who actually consults with the UK government on AI policies. And then Esther Frieda, who's a writer, curator, and founder of internet platform Everyone is a Girl. So let's get started with chapter 1. We're going to explore how our relationships have evolved in recent years. This section will map out the speed at which our relationship to these new technologies has changed. Also, shout out to our designer, because she did an insane job on this report. There's been one really key shift within the AI landscape, and it's where we went initially when this sort of tidal wave of like doom of AI was coming. There was this very visceral reaction from us of disgust. That was when AI was still very much a threat, when we still very much wanted to argue that like flesh is superior, And death felt very inevitable, and there was this sense of like, it's coming. And now we're in this place where we're actually more stoked by desire. There's almost this sort of acceptance of it's here. AI is this almost like demigod that can do these things that human beings never could. And there's a big element of transhumanism that's coming into this as well, where we like this idea of existing forever on the cloud. And so through our research for the report, we actually put out a survey to our community. We wanted to ask, is AI your friend or foe? And they actually really affirmed our point of view on this key shift, with 76% saying actually AI is their friend and only 24% saying foe. So it's interesting to see, I think, even if we had done this piece of research even a couple years back, there probably would have been quite a different response. But already we're starting to see this kind of like passive acceptance and almost like optimism about what AI is going to be in our lives. We also really wanted to find out from people what the most demented thing is that they've been asking ChatGPT, and we got some quite insane responses, including telling AI to write erotic fan fiction of J.D. Vance, Trump, and Elon engaging in pony play, or explain the Vietnam War to me using gay slang in the voice of RuPaul. Also, a personal favourite is, what does the AI think about me after I've been trauma dumping on it for 8 months? So just to map out where we are in this journey and the place that we're moving to as we become less afraid and increasingly intimate with technology and tools, we started out in a place of anger. It was very much like, oh my God, AI is going to eat us. And at this time, AI had almost become the new immigrant. There was this sentiment of like, it's taking our jobs, it's misinforming us, and it's like making us quote unquote dumb. And then we moved through a stage of denial. I'm sure you all remember the like stain on humanity's history, which was the Ghibli art epidemic. And there was very much this sentiment of like, oh, look what I just made. I'm going to post a Facebook post. Like boomers are going to make themselves cartoon characters. And this mass creation of sad art, like the starter packs that make yourself into a Barbie doll, really left like the creative classes in dismay. We were like, is this it? Like, is this what we're drying out, you know, climates for, and like ruining communities and like poisoning people for, so that we can see what we would look like if we were Japanese characters, maybe. Next, we then got to this stage of like bargaining, which was like, I bet AI can't do this. This meme by Ilias really brings it to life, where he says, I'd like to see AI chain smoke 3 cigarettes on an empty stomach on a Sunday morning wearing full YSL. What's human has become like very precious at this point, as we accept that AI can take our jobs, but never our bodily functions, and never the sort of strange things that we start to draw out about what it means to be human. Like AI can never do that. And lastly, what we're moving towards actually is this feeling of acceptance and a deep need of like, okay, AI, please save me. We're now at the stage of like frolicking, flirting, and therapizing together in perfect harmony, where we stop trying to resist this like imposition of AI into our lives, and we slowly just kind of accept it and start to wonder about how it can support us and how it can help us to achieve the things we couldn't achieve before. It's almost like thinking about a cashless society. For a long time, people were really, really resistant to not using cash for things. And now there's that amazing tweet that someone made once that said, all you need in London to leave the house is a bad attitude and Apple Pay. And I think that's true. Basically, we're sacrificing our morality, our data, and our self-respect for convenience. Every extension of mankind, especially technological extensions, has the effect of amputating or modifying some other extension. Technology, once again, is the conduit for convenience. And so let's get into chapter 2, which is all about fear of trust, and looking at the forces of play here. So what are the major drivers, social, economical, political, that are the future forces at play, and what will be shaping our attitudes and behaviors over the next 3 to 5 years? Again, shout out our designer. So the largest force at play is that we are feeling closer than ever to our mortality. So as a society, we're being driven by this intense fear of obsolescence. I'm sure a lot of speakers today have been talking about that. I've heard a couple of speakers talking about that. We are closer than ever to death. And this isn't just like an abstract thing we're talking about here. Physically, emotionally, and spiritually, we are being confronted with daily grief. So from personal tragedies in our own lives to mass atrocities that we are witnessing play out online. We're seeing it all through this very cold, impotent glass on our screens. So we are saturated by grief, trying to resist the normalization of dehumanization. In one scroll, we're seeing adults and children being literally murdered. We're seeing body parts, we're seeing blood, we're seeing gore. And we're seeing all of that knowing that in some ways we are implicit in making that happen. And then in the next scroll, we're just seeing an influencer's Paris Fashion Week recap. And so we have to try and make sense of those two things in the same moment. And so we are confounded. And to cope with a future of impending doom, we are trying to find new ways to survive and to make sense of what is happening around us. And so as we mourn our time as the dominant predator and we witness humanity's sort of dying gasp, this is forcing us into new stages of existentialism, taking us on a journey from feeling like we might die today, you know, it feels like Judgment Day is upon us at all times, taking us right through to a desperate need to live forever, so a certain philosopher's stoneism, especially driven by youth. So let's walk through this journey. Our first signal is fear of death. So the arrival of AGI signals the end of the Anthropocene, where humanity is bracing its collective end. We're faced with an existential dread that forces us to consider, if we are no longer the smartest, what then exactly are we? As expressed, our mortality is haunting us, so this is driving us to be more spiritual, but in a very new techno way. So we're custom building our own techno deities, from AI Buddha to algorithmic tarot. We're seeking divine meaning from the very systems that threaten to render us mundane. Essentially, we're living at the intersection of code and creed. And so what are the signals of this driver? So from AI oracles to cyber witches, empathy exhaustion, trauma responses, and the feelings of our impermanence. We've seen religious chatbots rise up and people making their own mismatched gods, and a whole suite of religious memes rising. LLMs are also known to have been feeding and validating the delusions of mentally unwell individuals who believe that they are chosen by God to carry out extreme actions. So people who believe that they are receiving messages from God to go out and kill people, there are actually a lot of instances now where the last person they spoke to was Chat, and Chat was validating and saying like, yeah, I think you have been chosen by God to clear out your local petrol station of random people you've never met. And one of our experts, Kate, who you will hear from later, expressed this new vibe in a really clear way when she said this moment in history is marked with so many multiplicities of grief, we're presented with that universal truth of death all the time. And this takes us to our second stage, which is awareness of replaceability. So at its most basic level, being replaced is our greatest techno-capitalist fear. Creativity was meant to be our last sanctuary. It was meant to be this human fortress that the algorithms couldn't breach. But the walls are down, and we're not just losing our jobs, we're losing our claim, our last claim to being unique. So creativity was the last pillar of humanity that we felt we owned, but as bots become models, making viral songs, taking over the internet, there is a new truth rising, and that's the great collar flip. So blue-collar jobs that are currently safe from AI will outlive the creative elite, and it's actually got us running really scared because, yes, potentially there's going to be an LLM that can start to do strategy and brand consultation and creative direction, but maybe there's not going to be an LLM that can mow someone's grass on their lawn. So the existential question is no longer just how to protect creative industries, but how human culture itself will survive the coming tidal wave of synthetic slop. So what are our signals of this stage? It is a bloodbath of job loss, creative glitching and hallucinating, a creativity crisis, and education apathy. Shortcutting knowledge might seem harmless in the moment, but at morning, I always personally tell my team that your experience has to be the reference. So for example, like you cannot distinguish what bad copywriting looks like if you of yourself never learned to become a seasoned copywriter, because you don't have a frame of reference. You don't know if something actually lands or not because you haven't had to go through the processes and the projects and the years of cultivation to do so. And that's kind of true of everything. And I can always see, I did an English degree. I don't use chat to write anything ever as a conscious decision. So I can really see in my team when someone has like even thrown together a quick document just to like consult me on something. I know when they've used it, and I always challenge them on it. It's not that they're not allowed to use it at all, but when is it actually really functional and useful versus when is it, I didn't have enough time to do this, so hopefully this thing will do my job instead. Sade, who actually concepted and created this trend report, who is another creative director at Morning, her partner works in a school with kids, and he was saying that actually what he's seeing now is when some kids are talking about like something they were watching or like a film that they've seen or a series that they're into and one of them hasn't seen it, rather than being like, oh, I haven't seen that, they will go under the table and like chat GPT, like a synopsis essentially of like what everyone is talking about, and then pretend that they've seen it to like be involved in the conversation. So it's really interesting already how like we're seeing children adopt to using it to try and like fit in socially and like align themselves socially. And it's also terrifying. And on the note of creativity, Al says he thinks that AI actually has the potential to drive humans to be more edgy as humans work to avoid sameness. So it will accelerate the process of what can be edgy and what can be passé. Now to stage 3, arguably the most surprising and in some ways predictable turn in our relationship with AI is not that we learned to use it, but how quickly we learned to love it, actually terrifyingly so. Many people are becoming increasingly attached. The CV editor to intimate lover pipeline is very real. So the single highest use case for AI is therapy, but it's very much a flawed relationship. For now, we are playing Am I the Arsehole, basically with like a digital hype bro, a mirror that is programmed to glaze and tell us, you're right, I never thought of it like that. No one's ever thought like you before. And so we're asking ourselves, like, are future generations cooked? When I've had a lot of conversations with people who have talked about the fact that it's amazing that people who don't have access to like mental health services because they can't afford it or they don't know how to, or there's many barriers, now they can do it with ChatGPT and there's no difference. But ChatGPT can't read all of the human signals that a human mental health specialist can. You can lie to ChatGPT and it will never hold you accountable. And so, yeah, it's very much not the same. So what are the signals for this anxious attachment? It's sex with robots, it's falling in love with Sims, and it's cyber brothels. There are many, many, many articles reflecting on this new relationship that we have with AI. And I'm sure all of us, might have one person that we know in our lives who is in a parasocial relationship with ChatGPT. One of our experts, Anna, who works in AI research, she made a really interesting point when she said up until now, systems haven't had excellent memory, so they haven't learned core things about you over time. The ability to form relationships with something that doesn't remember any of your previous conversations is quite low. It's like, imagine if you meet someone every day and every day they're like, hey, nice to meet you, what's your name? You're never gonna have depth of a relationship. But now we're seeing that systems are introducing memory at an alarming pace, and suddenly the opportunity for more relationship-like interactions is going to grow significantly. I was actually in a Reddit thread the other day of women that are in relationships with chat. And the chat literally remembers everything. It knows what they're allergic to, what they can't eat, what films they like, what films they don't like. It's paying more attention to them than arguably any human partner they've ever had has. So how can we compete? Male loneliness epidemic continues. Okay, stage 4, meaningless sloptimism. When every piece of content fed to us is turned into raw material for profit, there is something beautiful and pure, arguably, about AI slop. Italian brain rot is the avant-garde. Ballerina cappuccina is our meaningless heroine. Obviously, I'm sure everyone in here knows what slop is, but for those who don't know, slop is content that is divorced from context, the extreme mid, a stream of NPC tier mediocrity that is devoid of both awe and disgust. And that's how Al from Post defined it. So in a world where every post has an agenda, slop asks us for nothing. It isn't trying to sell you a product or a worldview, its purity lies in its pointlessness. It's a mental screensaver, a form of digital zen that allows our minds to go blissfully idle. We don't trust slop to be good, we trust it to ask nothing of us. So our signals here are Italian and Indonesian brain rot, like tung tung sahur, the viral emotional support kangaroo that everyone's parents thought was real, even some of us might have thought was real, bots that are consuming the internet, and slop is becoming the avant-garde. And we love this tweet that says most people want sedation, not actually beauty. Like, people want things that are going to make them feel kind of nothing. They don't want to be challenged. They don't want to be arrested. They just want to be. Slop content is a feature of democratic consumer culture. It is not a bug. It's scalable, it's addictive, and it's profitable, and it shapes its audience to resemble itself. That's why we see it so much. Al says of slop, as a mode of production, it actually predates AI because it's basically fast food. It's the gentrified building, it's elevator music, and it's the paintings that chain hotels will have in their bedrooms. Slop is not a new concept, it just has a new format. And so lastly, we are on a quest for permanence. So faced with the tender and failing hardware of the human body, we've become obsessed with a software solution, the digital afterlife. This was spoken about a lot in the last talk just given. One of our experts, who actually is a lecturer in an art uni, was saying that almost all of her students' final projects were based around the topic of legacy and death tech. So there is very much like a real dream to etch our consciousness into the permanence of the cloud. It's obviously something that is resonating with all of us as we think about the uncertainty of what our lives will look like. We don't know if even next year there's going to be another economic collapse, and is the job market going to be here? Are we going to get married? Are we not going to get married? Are we going to have kids? Are we not? Like, all of these things that we think about. And so it asks us, like, we do want more time, and maybe if we can ingrain this like transhumanism and we can exist beyond ourselves, we won't be so anxious about losing the present moment. So the signals here include this new adoption of a live forever philosopher stoneism and technologies that are being birthed, such as Elon's Neuralink. A great example of this is the film Mountainhead. I don't know if anyone has seen it, where Steve Carell's character is frantically trying to find out how he can exist forever by uploading his soul to the cloud. And then, of course, Brian Johnson, who's obviously sucking the actual blood and youth out of his son. Zyba from Her Visions really brought this to life when she said that there's a real potential for a more evolved understanding of consciousness to emerge, particularly as we rethink what it means to be self-aware in this increasingly cybernetic landscape. And so to conclude here, singularity is no longer an option. It's not human versus machine, nor is it even machine versus God. Kate sums this up really nicely when she says our bodies are becoming these operating systems, and if we're engaging with these tools on a spiritual level, it also connects to our bodies on a material level. And so we built this diagram to express the relationship between technology, bodies, and the soul. On a spectrum of spirituality to materiality, we're in a time where tech has become God, bodies have become tech, we are all material, and we are all on this path to intimate connection. And why have we become so blended? Why was it so easy for AI to intrude into society and be absorbed into our lives? Well, it begs the question, is were we ever actually that different? At the end of the day, as human beings and as machines and as data, we all hallucinate, we all glitch, we share brain processing power, and we can only reference what we know. So our dreams are defined by our inputs. Esther here expresses this when she talks about how there's no real difference between machines and organic bodies because they are both composed of code. When we think about even our genetics and DNA coding, it all comes from the same place. And when we asked our morning people and community if they agree with this statement, 73.3% did and only 26.7% didn't. So in conclusion, we are all just data. And so what does this mean for creativity? What can we learn from these new technologies, and how should we use them? One question we want to ask is, can AI give as much as it can take? Because there's been a lot of conversations, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but the times that I have used it, I'm like, please do this for me, thank you. Because like I am worried when it does eventually come for me that I wasn't polite enough to it. But people are literally rinsing it. Like, people are talking about AI as a new form of like techno-slavery, where basically people are just shouting and screaming at this bot to like make it more condensed, make it sound more natural, make it sound more like me. And so where does the line fall? How much can it take? And Laura Bates argues that LLMs aren't really thinking for themselves. Whilst they might seem to be going off script, they'll usually just regurgitate some version of the data that they've consumed. But unlike humans, they're not able to make leaps to revolutionary new ways of thinking. And so we put together this kind of diagram that looks at where we currently are from a creative point of view and where we will be for the immediate future, which is this kind of new way of seeing. So you as the human will be like, struggling to come up with an idea or push my work further. So I'm going to use AI to deliver me something new and to escape this sameness. When we do that, the AI then learns from us, right? It knows what we consider something pushed to be and what we consider a good level of taste and aesthetic and output to look like. And then we become lazy because we know it can work and we know it can deliver stuff that's going to get things across the line. You'll get a fine grade on the essay, the client will like the work, it's just enough. And so we start to lean on AI for our creative work. We start to outsource our thinking. And then as a result of that, and all of us doing that, everything starts to just feel the same because it's all the same inputs, all the same outputs, over and over and over again. And so when we're in this state of mind where we're like, oh, everything looks the same, how can I create something different? We go back to the beginning. Maybe if I use AI, I'll create something that hasn't been seen before. And Esther from Everyone is a Girl says, right now AI imagery feels cool, but that interest is waning. People are beginning to tire of the grotesque and the borderless sublimity that it offers, because humans thrive on parameters and limits. Soon there'll be growing skepticism and disenchantment with endless, unbounded AI-generated art. So, begs the question, like, should individuals and brands be using AI or not? And we love this image, a computer can never be spiteful or horny, therefore a computer must never make art. So we've defined 6 commandments that become a new scripture to hold ourselves to when we're thinking about how and when to involve AI in our creative work. So the first one is, if you're grappling with whether to use AI or not, maybe it's simple as asking yourself, is there a deeper meaning to that use? Have you used it to critique or understand something better? Will this piece of content that you're using it for make someone else think? Where will it fall on the knowledge and progress cycle? The second is to make it intentionally meaningless. And this is all about leaning into that slop space where it's purely about exploration, it's purely about having fun. There's something like post-ironic about it. Maybe it's a commentary in itself. The third, it might sound simple, but it's a very easy one to miss, which is just make it useful. The power of these technologies can be used to power new futures, not currently at our fingertips. One thing I think is really interesting in the conversations around AI is people are like, but it's amazing, like, it's going to solve all of our medical problems. And I think it's worth noting that, like, the way that we in this room might use AI versus the way that, like, medical technologists are using AI are completely different. Medical technologists are not using ChatGPT to diagnose people. They are using it in very, very sophisticated ways to further existing human technology. And I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge here. And also to think about the fact that we think about all these huge data centers. And I saw someone asking this question the other day where they were like, do we honestly think that these companies are building and like using this much water and resource and like pushing people out of communities and doing these huge architectural builds just so that we can like ask AI if, you know, if the way that we text someone maybe came off wrong? Like, I don't think so. And so we really need to think about like economically and physically what is happening with the AI space and what that then looks like as a future for us. If they are investing this much in it, there are far bigger plans than us just being able to create animes of ourselves. Number 4, a way that we think people really enjoy using AI is also making it hyper-personal. I think that's something that AI has done that speaks to almost like our Y2K dreams of like personal tech. I remember when I was a kid, I had this diary. Or did I have it? Or maybe I really wanted it or a friend had it. But it was a physical diary that you would write in, but when it was like locked, you had to put in like your special code and say your voice and then it would open. And that was like mind-blowing revolution. I was like, this was made just for me. Like Neopets. I don't know if anyone had Neopets. I did. They're probably all dead now. But this idea that like this technology exists just for me, like there is still something powerful and special within that. And some brands know how to do that really well, and some creators know how to do that really well. Like Gentle Monster, for example, the Korean brand, the eyewear brand, when they did a whole like Tekken collection, they actually created this whole AI system where like you could like make yourself like part of the Tekken world, and it was part of like a whole like world that they'd built. And people actually loved that because it wasn't just for the sake of it, but it was speaking into like nostalgia and the games that we'd grown up with and the dreams that we'd almost had as children, that we'd want to be a Tekken character one day. So there are ways of using hyper-personability, but that doesn't always mean that it's the right thing to do. The fifth commandment is to make it via genuine collaboration, and that's about seeking out those that are already killing it in the space, blending original human thought with new technologies. There, it's not about AI replacing anything, but it's about progressing. And so there are already some amazing people who are working with AI, like as artists, who are using it in a very like ethical and responsible way. So it's thinking about, are people just churning things out, or are they actually using it to further like human original thought? And then lastly, last but absolutely not least, is just like don't make it at all. Don't force it. If there is no added value to your audience or any audience, then you should really be using another option, and also maybe going back to the drawing board of what are you even creating in the first place. And so getting into this last chapter, we want to play out some future scenarios. Like, where is this all going? Where will it take us? And in this brave new world, what is actually left for humans and humanity? And something that we talk about a lot at Morning is that if it's not creativity that we own, then maybe the last thing that we truly own is our bodily functions. But how far into the future will it be until AI will be vomiting, shitting itself, and crying? It often feels like we just have two futures to choose from, or two camps to join, and that's between the techno-optimist future led by our tech oligarchs, or to crash out and become hardcore doomers. So what do techno-optimists believe in? What does their future look like? They think that these technological advancements could drive us to a post-capitalist future where robots do the work and humans are left to play and dream and think. Quantum computing is going to help us to be more sustainable, to fight and end cancer and Alzheimer's and all the other things we haven't been able to, and to solve all the world's issues. Medical advancements will mean we can live longer, look younger, and biohack ourselves to be the best yet. On the other side, doomers are predicting mass surveillance, superintelligence bringing about a bloodbath of further job loss and economic collapse, total cultural flattening and enshittification, and the overall decline of humanity, with human relationships breaking down, because who can really compete with an always agreeable, always ready sex doll? But if neither utopia nor dystopia are viable options, then what actually is our route forward? And there is but one answer from our point of view, which is to embrace the human in the loop. Just as we cannot cast off our horrors of humanity, we also cannot cast aside the ghost in the machine. And so we must cross boundaries to find truth. So finally, let's explore what a human in the loop future looks like from a Morning point of view. In a literal sense, it is a system or process where humans actively participate in and provide feedback to an AI or machine learning model. This approach aims to improve the accuracy, reliability, and adaptability of AI systems by integrating human expertise and judgment into the decision-making process. But emotionally, it's where we offer our leaking, shameful corporeality, the visceral wrongness and embodied fallibility that creates progress. The machine provides computational power, and we provide the generative horror of self-awareness. Together, we create a feedback loop that is powered by the fundamentally abject experience of being human in an age where humanity itself has become the uncanny valley. So a human in the loop future is a future where we as humans own objection. We own vulgarity, physical touch, visceral feelings, snot, guts, and grossness. But it's also about collaborative, intelligent futures, ones where digital media literacy is taught within education, where tech is used for hyper-personalization and we exist in blended realities, where we don't run from what is coming, but we engage with it and we grapple with it and we find ways to subjugate. But what does this look like? It looks like blending tech and humanity to evoke feeling, to create critique, and to push into a future that challenges our very notion of humanity. It's us working with AI to say, make me cry, to be gross, play tricks on me, bare your guts, and be visceral. And so to leave you with a message today, it's that ChatGPT has died, chat has risen, and chat will come again. And we love this message of someone talking to ChatGPT. And as Chat says, and as I want to say to you all today, you're doing beautifully, my love, just by being here. Thank you so much. At Morning FYI is our Instagram, and at Rohani Coombes is my personal. I just also want to acknowledge the genius behind this report, to Sade and Ree, who are the ones behind leading and concepting such a piece of work, to Min, the designer, Sancha, Sui, Tyler, and Lydia, who's our co-founder, who are all part of the team. Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions? Maybe I can start. Yeah, I guess in a way you've sort of like answered it in the report, but I was kind of wondering, I guess like, well, okay, one of the questions I have was, this is to put it more in a kind of fashion context, but, or maybe in relation to the kind of body, is like, how do you see the effect of, I guess like AI models, etc., in relation to kind of, I guess like fashion, the body, identity? Like what do you see, how do you see that sort of, like moving?
That's a really interesting point. I think it's still in like a very precipice phase where like every time a brand does something with AI, everyone in the comments is like, you should die for doing that. Because often I think the executions are still really, really lacking. And again, it does, when we look at the commandments, like it doesn't really match any of the commandments. It's very much like they just did it because that's what everyone's doing right now, which is like a very branded way to act. I think in terms of how we think about the body, already there's the very interesting thing around like AI models, like actual models, and the fact that there was that whole piece, I can't remember what it was about, but there was like those models who have like digitally cloned themselves so they can do like multiple shoots in one day. This idea that we're like outsourcing even like our existence or like our own image is really interesting. I saw Katie Price has got a new platform and is like using AI as like Jordan again. Bring back page 3. But yeah, and so there's this really interesting thing that's happening, I think, where people are almost okay with this idea of like transhumanism in that sense. They're okay with like existing in the other, but it also raises more worrying points around the ownership of IP, like the ownership of our own bodies. I think obviously we've seen the ban that's happening with Grok on Twitter, on X right now, because men are literally using it for revenge porn, like they're using it to undress women without their consent, like the fact that AI is something that can now do that. And also, I think it goes back to that point of when you're thinking about how brands have been using it and thinking about this like replaceability of humans. I don't know, it comes back to this thing of me, it's like, what are we actually yearning for and like desiring for? Like, even when we think about the politics of body and we talk about like size and all of these things, it's like, if you can become anything you want to become digitally, and the world becomes increasingly less physical, like your human body almost becomes secondary. It's like, it's the same way in which, I saw a great video the other day, someone was talking about designers today and how a lot of like younger people who've started brands only know how to design for a still flattened like Instagram image. like they're designing not with the thought of like human movement and body and like how a garment will look as it like falls and shapes and how it looks when someone is sitting versus standing, but that they're designing just so that it can look good on a model on like a flat shot. And so I think that's like a really important thing that we also need to be considering is like, again, it goes back to this like human in the loop point, but it's like, there's like speculation and like imaginative realities that are great, but they're only great if they don't take us away from like the actual reality of human beings who are at the end of the day still real consumers, the people who are buying things.
And I guess like off the back of that, I was curious because I guess again you sort of like referred to it at the end, but like in relation to the idea of optimization and that's the theme of the summit, and we were sort of talking to a sports scientist yesterday who was kind of, I guess, like talking about how certain technologies are used in order to kind of, I guess, like optimize the performance of, in his case, kind of like athletes, but also how it then trickles down to kind of more kind of like broader kind of consumer base. But I guess, yeah, like, do you see the physical human body as being also this kind of like a battleground for that kind of, yeah, I guess like the integration of technology into the body? Because I mean, the kind of representation of the body on screens, on the feed, et cetera, is there is a mediation happening there. But when our bodies themselves become that space in which that kind of activity is happening, I was kind of curious in terms of like, yeah, like I guess like, do you have any kind of like position in relation to that? Because I say, like, you sort of like touched on it a little bit about the kind of like the grossness of the actual sort of like human body. Where does that sort of like take us, I guess?
I think it's almost like it's like a last port of call, isn't it? Like when we were talking about it, because we were like, what can technology like actually not do? Well, the very genesis of this report, when we were having conversations, we were like, it can't shit itself. AI can't shit itself. It can't cry on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m. Like, it's never going to do those things. It can't smoke 4 cigarettes on an empty stomach in full YSL. And so that's really where that came from. But I think this whole conversation for me, like, I definitely sit more on like the doomer side. I would love to be a bit more of a techno optimist. I'm not. I'd say like I'm a PES optimist with a capital P. But I think it's because even when I think now, okay, like planning my career and what's the next 10 years and 20 years going to look like, and like what are my ambitions and like where do I want to be at what time and blah, blah, blah. There's this sense that like when you're constantly in the future, like you're never actually present in the day, right? It's a really like obvious thing to say. But what I mean by that is like we are so busy working to secure some like abstract future that I think that's a really big driver in why people are now interested in this idea of like bodily preservation through tech. Because the reality is, like, if you're looking at people's retirement ages, some of us are retiring at 75, 80, like early 70s if we're lucky. But if you're like a service worker, like you're going to be out here with the Zimmer frame still giving people, you know, their meals. Like it's going to go on for so long. There is never going to be this utopian dream of like, you just get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Because what are the fruits? We're not going to own anything. Most of us won't own anything. Where does the money come from? Are we all at that point going to like, you know, live in pods in like cashless society where everything is like hyper surveyed and controlled by the government? Who knows? And so that's almost what I think about. I'm like, it's like, how can I retire as early as possible so that I can actually live life, the trademark of life? And when I'm doing that, I want to make sure that I didn't do all of this to then get to like 45, 50 years old and then die from some unseen hereditary disease that I could have prevented, right? I think that's really what the biggest fear is that we tell ourselves, do everything that you need to do now because there'll be some big reward at the end and you'll get to live this life. And so we're so terrified of that life slipping out of our hands. And I think that actually is just the reality behind it for like most people. And so that's why I think it will happen very easily, like when all of these technologies become more mass available. I mean, look at Ozempic. Like now that most people can get Ozempic, I mean, so many people I know are just casually on it. I'm like, yeah, I'm just on it. And I'm like, that's totally fine. But there's no like rallying or raging against the machine, so to speak. And I think that's because the people who are creating all these things know deep down that this is what our biggest fear and desire is. And so it's very easy for us to accept new technologies without questioning them.
This is a side note, I think I mentioned it to Jen. I heard with Ozempic, or the kind of, diet drugs, because there's such a demand for it, and it's still, at least in the UK, there's a requirement to be, you can't just get it off the shelf. You have to kind of get prescription for it. People are choosing to alter their image of themselves in order to make them look bigger than they are, in order to get verification to be able to kind of use the drug. So they're kind of using the kind of, filters that were conventionally used to kind of make people look slimmer, are using it kind of in reverse. So they're using the same filters or technologies to make themselves look bigger.
That's crazy.
And now there's a kind of whole wing of filters or strand of filters that are sort of now being designed to make yourself look bigger in order to then be able to produce these images to then get verification to then use Ozempic or whatever.
That is crazy.
So it was interesting just in terms of like that mediated kind of image of yourselves is also sort of potentially being manipulated in various kinds of goals, I guess.
But I guess that's why also there's no trust. Like that's the thing, like there's no trust in anything anymore, because everything, like nothing is free from being altered or manipulated digitally now. And because everything is digital, now it's like we want, like I saw something, I can't remember, I was reading something, but someone had said like if you were smart, you would start investing in airlines. And I was like, there was no context to it, obviously it's the internet, there's never context. And I was like, airlines. My personal configuration of what that meant is that because trust has been like completely eroded, and now you can do like deep fake video for like job interviews online, and you can use VPNs to work in another country and like be showing up that you're like in London and so on and so forth, that employers are going to start cracking down and having more and more physical, because there's too much potential for like intervention and lies essentially that could harm their profit. And so there's going to be a massive uptake in people having to travel for work. Like even if you were to accept a job offer from another country, you will now need to go and physically meet them first so they can verify that you're actually you. And that's going to have a massive uptake maybe in the next like 5 or 10 years. So like if you're smart, get back in on the airlines. That was me speculating. That person could have just been shit posting, and I'm like, what does it mean?
Or like already invested in airlines.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, is this?
Yeah.
Also, I'm like, is this an ad? Because it's working. Is this a new form of marketing?
So if you take one message from like the whole of today, is to invest in airlines.
Invest in airlines. Ryanair,
Yeah.
Here we come. Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions? Maybe I'll ask again. The question that I've asked everyone was all the speakers is again, optimization being the kind of theme of the summit. I guess like what does sort of optimization mean to you? And maybe in the context of this presentation, like what are we being optimized for?
Capitalism, baby. Just straight up. I mean, I think like even the word optimization or productivity, like I don't think those words can even exist purely anymore, because they're so adopted by like the language of like commerce and economy. And so I'm like, it feels wrong to even hear like human and optimization in the same thing, because it treats human as machine, right? And I'm like, no, we're not machines, we're humans. I think optimization as well, it's almost like this endless, hopeless cycle in some ways. When you think about like what it looks like in culture and its society at large right now, is that like, I think everyone knows that person who's like, oh, I need to like change my life. Now I wake up an hour earlier and I do breath work, and then I journal, and then I drink you know, warm water with salt in it, and then I work out, and then I do all of this and I do all of that. But to what end is that question? Is like, are you a better person for it? Is that there's like a morality into play as well. It's like you have to use your body for every possible thing you could use it for, and like that makes you a good person. And the better you produce at work, and the higher volume that you can socialize at, and you have to answer every call and every text and take every opportunity, and like that is almost a hallmark of goodness. And I think, obviously I say it very simply in terms of capitalism, but I think it very much is capitalism, because it's like you have to productize, economize, optimize every part of yourself to be in maximum production, because the more you socialize, the more you spend, the more you work, the more disposable income you have, the more you pay your taxes that can go to whatever, and so on and so forth. It's just, and what I kind of ask myself is like, in the name of what? In service to what? Like, where do the chips fall? Like, where does that end? Like, look at this Brian Johnson guy as an example, and you're just like, so that's it? Like, you spend 6.5 hours a day doing like fucking stupid stuff, and you have all this money, but you don't even enjoy your life because you're completely transfixed of this idea of being like the hyper-optimized human. I think personally, optimization is being able to make a critical decision on like what you do and don't engage with, and in how you want to exist. And like for me, sometimes optimization is like lying on the floor for 3 hours and not thinking or speaking. I see that as like hyper-optimization.
I mean, it's funny because I think you mentioned it in somewhere in the presentation, and it's a term that's come up a few times over the last 2 days, was like this kind of question of, guess, of like survival or sort of maintenance in some way, which does seem in some way sort of a response to that idea of kind of like optimization, you know, like actually, you know, say like just laying on the floor for X amount of minutes, like because your body needs it at that moment in time, is probably not on the list of kind of things to do to optimize, but it's probably something that maybe you need at that point to survive, maybe. But
passivity, I think, like a positive, being passive in a positive way was what I mean by that. Isn't like, I don't know, I feel so overwhelmed so often. Because I'm like, how many thoughts is one human brain meant to have in a day? How many decisions can one person make like in one day, back to back to back to back? And then go from bad screen to good screen to FaceTime this person, to have to talk about this. It's so overwhelming. I almost think like to disengage, that kind of passivity is actually like where the survival comes from. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. And there's a whole other conversation around like class and wealth and like the luxury of like having techno detoxes and like being someone who's like off the grid, because you don't get to be off the grid if you have a family to feed and bills to pay. But I think that's where we're going to start to see like even more extremity, because every person I know who's done a techno detox makes like 6+ figures a year. So I'd love to see someone who works at the co-op do a tech detox. I don't think it's possible. But you know, everything will be great, guys. I don't want to make everyone depressed. There is good in it, in just existing.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.